Are God's miracles reserved only for the believer who knows the Lord and exercises faith in Him? Is God limited to work only to people who believed and followed Him? Is God limited? Or is God free to demonstrate His unmerited favor to all people regardless whether they believed or follow Him? If you're taking notes, I would like to give a title to our conversation today, Anonymous Providence. Providence was defined as God's care before you realized it. Anonymous because you will learn today that many times, even in our very own lives, God was the anonymous provider. During those times, when we look back many years ago when we were young, how many times God intervened in our lives and we did not know that it was God working in our lives. An anonymous providence raises up those who do not know or acknowledge God. We come to realize later on, only now that we have been exposed to the gospel, that we came to realize, God, it was you all the while. God, it was you all along. You were the one working in our lives. Because I have a very important truth that I want you to remember today. If there's one important truth that I want you to bring home in your heart, this is it. God is free in His sovereignty to show grace to any human being who neither knew Him nor believed in Him. One of the most important biblical theology, the belief that we have to set our hearts correctly, is that God is not the God for Christians only. Take note of that. We don't have the exclusivity of God. God is not only working among the people who believed in Him. As a matter of fact, God has been performing miracles, doing signs and wonders, not only to His own people, but because He's the God of the entire universe, He's the God of the whole world, all the inhabitants of the world, whether they are Filipinos, Asian, or whatever race we belong, God is the God of all people. That's why John in chapter 3 said, "For God so loved the world." He was not only the God of the Jews. Jesus was not only sent to the Jews. God so loved the world because He is the God of the world. What I want you to do today is that when we observe the world, when we watch the news, we observe the world, our neighbors, our relatives, our friends, our colleagues, when we watch their lives, you will have a change of perspective because you start to see that God is the one working in their lives in an anonymous providence. Because the work of God in our lives, even before we were born, you'll be surprised. Psalms 139, written by David, "You are the one who formed me in my mother's womb." God was the one who formed you in your mother's womb. We were formed. We were fearfully and wonderfully made, David said. See, even before we come to know God, God has been involved in your life and in my life. Because God is free in His sovereignty to show grace to any human being who neither believed nor knew Him. Jesus is not limited by human frailty as He works the work of God. I remember, let me say this, allow me to say this, 1974, when my father died, we were 10. We are 10 in the family. I'm the youngest. Unfortunately, 2 of my siblings died. One because of the accident, the earthquake that happened in the Ruby Tower. I don't know if you remember the Ruby Tower event in the Philippines. One of my brothers was there, and he was caught there. And another sibling died through birth. So when my father died, the business was bankrupt, and none of us were able to carry on what my father was doing. So we were literally adopted by my auntie in Bicol. That's why I grew up in Naga. 8 of us. It was not a joke to adopt 8 people, no? Children. 9 plus my mom. We were adopted because apparently it was my father who blessed my auntie to form her own business. So it was like an act of gratitude. So we found ourselves in Bicol. I remember vividly, I was grade 1, and my mom, my ama, told me, "Anak, I hope you don't mind to wear socks. Parehas naman white, pero different designs." Yeah, I wear white socks, grade 1. Both of them are white, but the other one is different design because we could not afford. Sabi ko, "Ma, it's okay." But prior to the enrollment, I have witnessed several, if not 1 to 3 years, there was this package that would come to Naga with an anonymous sender. And when we opened this package, it was like tela, the textiles for my uniform, my shorts, and my polo. And it looks like that the person that would send knew in what school I go. Because it's exactly the same uniform. 1 or 2 years, it went like 2 to 3 years that we would always receive. And later on, I found out that it was my ninang, my Chinese ninang, who was a very close friend of my father, who learned about our situation and did not hesitate to send. But during those times, I was reflecting when I was preparing my sermon. I said, Lord, those were anonymous providences in my life. I didn't even know you yet. I had no idea of what you have done for me. In those days, looking back, I would say, oh, maswerte lang ako. Or maybe because I have a generous ninang. And we ascribe most of the time his anonymous providences sometimes to luck, swerte, buenas ako, matalino ako, or whatever, or mabait yung aking ninang. Sometimes we associate all these things, but today I want you to remember, brothers and sisters, that the anonymous providence of God is not limited whether we believed in Him or not. John chapter 5 is a very interesting episode in the Gospel of John. And as I go through the story, huwag po kayong may inis dahil sa bandang gitna at sa bandang huli, medyo nakakainis yung kwento. Baka mag-react kayo, pero hold on to your temper. But I want you to see an instance, a scenario in the Gospel of John of how Jesus became the anonymous provider to a person who didn't even sought to believe and even have a closer relationship with Him. Chapter 5, it started with this. John the Apostle was writing the Gospel. He said, sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jew. Now, being a Jew, being part of Judaism, the religion of the Jews, if you read the story of the Jewish people, male Jews who live 15 miles of Jerusalem are actually required to attend festivals. They have 3 major festivals in Israel. And we were not told what kind of feast Jesus was attending. But for Jesus, He was faithfully doing His part. He was attending this festival in Jerusalem. Now, John was trying to say at the outset, prepare your mind. Jesus went to Jerusalem. It's one of the festivals, which means He's preparing our mind that there will be big crowd in Jerusalem. So, people from as far as Capernaum, as far as Galilee would travel in caravan just to join the festivals of the Jews. Verse 2, now there is in Jerusalem, according to John, describing to us, near the sheep gate, a pool. Now think about the pool. Now imagine that. There's this pool, which in Aramaic, or in the vernacular, is called Bethesda, or in other translation, it's Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered columns. So a vivid picture of a pool where there is a roof, like an indoor thing. Now, because John would describe to us that Jesus would go to this place. Here, sabi ni John, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. Now, pause for a while. Paralyzed, disabled people would crowd that place because they were expecting for miracles. And it's the best place to go because people are religious. When you ask for alms, they'll give you. Try to picture in your mind, there were so many disabled people waiting here, but this is a particular, a peculiar place. And if you will notice in some of your versions in the Bible, verse 4 is missing. I don't know, if you check in your Bible, some versions of the Bible, of the New Testament, they took out verse 4, simply for some reasons that some scholars believe it was not part. But if you read it, it actually didn't even change the story. It added to the story. So it's like an addition to describe what's going on. So I'll show it to you for the sake of understanding the continuity of the story. So this is verse 4. When John was describing the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed, this is the continuation. They were there waiting for the stirring of the water of an angel, for an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and stirred up the water. And whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well from whatever disease that person had. So there was this story that has been passed from generations that this particular pool in Jerusalem, there's such a miracle going on there. Now, we were not told how often the angel would go down and stir the water. So now, I want you to imagine, all the disabled people are gathering around this pool because they were hoping for a miracle, to receive a miracle from that situation. So John was now describing to us the scenario where Jesus would connect and perform a miraculous work. Now, there was no record that there was a healing that happened in that pool. When actually I researched on it, there was this daw, according to archaeologists, there's this stream that passes underneath that pool, that every time there's a current, it creates some stirring of the water. So I don't know, maybe there was this man who started telling about superstitions, no? We have so many superstitious beliefs. Like, I don't know what's the relationship between, if you're getting married, you have to offer egg somewhere so that it will not rain. I don't know the relationship between the egg, how many eggs, luto na ba yun or what, so that it will not rain. And we have superstitious belief or tradition that if you want to have a baby girl, you have to go to a certain place to dance. I don't know what's the relationship between these things. But we have our own superstitious belief. And this particular man and the rest of the paralyzed people were there, concentrating on the water, because anytime if you blink, if you go to the toilet, and you miss the stirring of the water, you don't know how long you will wait again for the angel to go down. So that's the scenario. Now listen carefully. The next verse was interesting. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, this is serious. That man was lying there more than the age of Jesus. Jesus only lived for 33 and a half years. And when this one is being written, or when these things happen, maybe Jesus was 31 or 32. Next verse, this is interesting. When Jesus saw him, I highlighted the word saw, because out of the many disabled people, Jesus was very particular of this man. Because he was about to do something that will create an impact in the life and ministry of Jesus in the entire history of Israel. So when he saw this man, probably he asked around, because it says there, he saw this man lying and he learned. How did he learn? Two things. Maybe he was asking around. Maybe there were bystanders, the relatives of other paralyzed people who were there to assist them. If the water stirred, they will just throw their loved ones into the water. Huh? Many are bystanders just observing. Maybe Jesus asked one of them, who is that man? And he learned out that man, he was the first one here, 38 years already. Or probably, I was imagining, and Jesus was observing in that pool in Bethesda, and he saw this man, the worst scenario, miserable situation, na notice niya, siguro he was there lying because he was paralyzed. He couldn't even move near the pool. And Jesus come to him, approached him, and he was staring at the water in the pool, and Jesus asked him, how long have you been in that situation? Maybe the man said, without looking at Jesus, later on you'll agree with me, without looking at Jesus because he was staring at the water, 38 years I've been here. Then Jesus asked this question to this man, which at first I said, it's a silly question. So Jesus asked him, do you want to get well? I can imagine he was staring at the pool, the water. How long have you been here? 38 years. Do you want to get well? He was concentrating because he don't want to miss again the stirring of the water. Do you want to get well? Of course, obviously, Lord, he wants to get well. Pero I've realized, not everyone wants to get healed. Because maybe this man has become accustomed and comfortable with these situations. For 38 years, he was not doing anything. He was depending on the alms of people and the help of his relatives. And all of a sudden, you will heal this person. What will he do? He will have to be responsible for himself. He will no longer be asking alms. He will be expected to work. And maybe he doesn't know to work anymore. So it's not really a joke when we receive freedom, when we receive healing, because there's responsibility to it. That's why they asked the question of Jesus, do you want to get well? Was a penetrating question, a valid question, a question to the will of the person. Do you want to get well? Was raised to force us to face our own inner hesitancy. Do you still hope? The man was looking at the water. How long have you been there? 38 years. He doesn't want to be disturbed. Anytime the water will be stirred. Do you want to get well? Look at the answer of this man. Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. If you notice, he did not answer Jesus' question directly. Instead, he gave excuse of his situation. Maybe, please don't disturb me anytime the water will be stirred. And while they were conversing, Jesus said something to him. while they were conversing, then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." Now, pause for a while. Lord, this man was not asking for healing. He was not even expressing his faith in you. He was not seeking for any help. And all of a sudden, while Jesus was saying, conversing with this man, "Sir, I don't have anyone to help me," Jesus tell him, "Get up." The very impossible thing this man could not do. Jesus said, "Get up, take up your mat, and walk." And all of a sudden, I believe even the will to stand was given to the man. Because God is free in His sovereignty to show grace to any human being who neither knew Him nor believed in Him. To receive a miracle, faith is not necessary. Listen very carefully. Yes, faith is prerequisite. But to receive a miracle is not necessary because God is free. God has been performing miracles in many lives of people who doesn't even have idea who He is. Sa buhay din natin eh. How many times the Lord delayed your taxi because He was protecting you from an accident? But do we know it? Do we recognize it? No. How many times God healed us? How many times in the past we don't even recognize? To receive a miracle, God is free. Now, I'm not talking about salvation. Salvation, you need to believe and trust. But not everyone who receive miracle are saved or will go to heaven. I have attended many crusades in the Philippines, in Araneta, in the different parts. People are healed, but it's one thing to be healed. It's one thing to receive miracle. It's one thing to live and trust Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Sometimes, we human beings are very selfish. We only come to Jesus because we need something from Him. And in return, when we get it, we forget Him. You see, if you realize, even in coming to Jesus, it's still selfish because we need Him. But a beautiful song we sang a while ago, because of who you are, Lord, not because of what you have done. Lord, I worship you. I hope we come to the point in our life, Lord, I worship you. I come to church not because of what you have done, but because of who you are. Just regardless whether you are doing something to my life, I know who you are. You are God alone. This man, God, Jesus provided the will to stand, and when all of a sudden he was healed. Look at the next verse. At once, we were not told that in a slow motion the man felt something in his body. No, at once, immediately, instantly in other translation, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. And there was a problem. You know why? Because the day the miracle happened was a Sabbath. Now, what is this? Let me explain for a while. Sabbath for the Jews are one of the most important commandments. Actually, they make big fast of it. When God said in the seventh day, God rested, the religious leaders of Israel tried to define Sabbath and extended several meanings of what it means to work. On the day of Sabbath, Friday evening, 6 o'clock until Saturday evening, Sabbath, no one was allowed to work. Even to walk in your house, you have to be limited in walking. Otherwise, if you exceeded the steps, that's working. And you know this man carrying his mat is a violation of the Sabbath. Now, my question here, did Jesus intentionally do this on Sabbath? He could have waited one more day. Tomorrow, I'll heal you, not today. He could have come earlier. But Jesus intentionally healed this man because the last portion of chapter 5, if you read it tonight, you'll be surprised. The discourses of Jesus, the message that He preached to the religious leaders in their ears was so deep and was so overwhelming when He was being accused as He was equal with God because He was saying, yes, my Father. Yes, He rested on the seventh day, but God's compassion and mercy and love is not limited on Sabbath. He showed grace and mercy even on Sabbath day. And the persecution started because Jesus, in the ears of the religious leader, were trying to equate Himself equal with God. God has sent me. And if you don't listen to me, you don't listen to the one who has sent the Son. Now, this is the scenario of the healing. The man picked up his mat and started walking, and it was Sabbath. Therefore, he created a commotion. He created an attention to people. Next verse. And so the Jews, every time John would write the word Jews in the gospel, in this particular, he was not referring to the common people, he was referring to the religious leaders. So the Jews said to the man that was healed, it is Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. Hey guys, what's wrong with you? Are you not glad that this man is miraculously healed? They were so focused on the legalistic application of the law rather than rejoicing with the man who just miraculously healed from his 38 invalidity. We can be oblivious and so defocused and distracted that we miss the very act of God in front of our very eyes. They were not even congratulating the man. It is Sabbath, you are not allowed. Paraphrasing, it's forbidden for you to be well. You're not allowed to get well. But look at this man. Sabi ko sa inyo kanina, huwag kayong mainis eh. Dito nakakainis eh. Look at the man. The man that was healed, no? 38 years, all of a sudden miraculously healed. And look at the man, when he was interrogated, you are not supposed to violate Sabbath. And this man said, the man who made me well said to me, pick up. He was evading the responsibility. Huwag po akong pagalitan nyo. Pinagsabihan lang akong buhatin eh. Hello? Are you not grateful that you are healed? You've been delivered 38 years? That there was nothing that we can say that he was grateful. He was evading responsibility as if the man was trying to say, don't accuse me. Do not interrogate me. I was just told by this man. You see, he was not looking at Jesus. He was staring at the water of the pool. He was oblivious. He did not know who he was talking to. Possible kaya yun? This guy didn't even seek for a closer relationship with Jesus. Different from other miracles that happened in the gospel, this man did not even seek closer relationship with Jesus. In the first place, he did not ask for healing. In the first place, he did not even believe. He didn't even know Jesus' identity. How many people today, how many even us, receive miracle and we do not give credit to God? How many times we ascribe events in our lives to other things, to luck, suerte, buenas, or whatever, our strength, our wisdom, where in fact we are unaware of the anonymous providence of God in our lives. The man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. It is really strange to read this. So they asked him, the religious leaders, so if you don't know the man, who is this fellow? Who is this fellow who told you to pick up your and walk? They were interrogating him. You see, the man had no idea who Jesus was. The man, according to John, commentary ni John, the man who was healed had no idea who it was. You know why? Because when Jesus was talking to the man, how long have you been there? 38 years. Do you want to get well? I had no one, sir. Without looking at Jesus, his eyes were staring on the pool. Anytime the water will be stirred, he doesn't want to miss it. And then Jesus, while he was still talking to Jesus, Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And all of a sudden, this man was healed. And he started to look around. Jesus slipped away from the crowd. So he did not know the identity of Jesus. But Jesus recognized him. Can you imagine? He was in the very presence of the anonymous provider. He was in the very presence of God, and he was not aware. How many times in our lives, my brothers and sisters, that we are not aware of the very presence of God in your lives, in our lives? That we miss that. How many times this man had no idea. Look back 10, 20 years, 40 years ago in our lives. How many times God intervened in the situations of our families, our fathers, our parents were sick, and God was there. How many times we had no idea at all that God was there all along. You see, God is free in His sovereignty to show grace to any human being who neither knew Him nor believed in Him, because God is not limited by the frailty of man to do His work. Even Jesus, He was not dependent whether the man is cooperating or the man is believing. Because the intention of Jesus is that when He performed anonymous providences and interventions in our lives, that someday we would realize and we would come to know Jesus and say, Lord, you are the man. You are the God who has been working in my lives all along. Lord, I'm sorry. All along, I thought you left me. All along, I thought you were not there. But all along, all the while, you were the one working in our lives. Mga kapatid, the point here is, when we look at the world today, I challenge each and every one of us. When you look around, you will realize that we don't have the exclusivity of God. God is not only at work in the lives of people who believed in Him. God has been working, not only for the Jews, but even the Gentiles in the Old Testament. He is the God of all races in this world. God is performing and doing signs and wonders in many lives, even for those who do not believe in Him. Because one day, God wants them to realize it was His anonymous providence. Our role is that when we intersect, when we try to cross paths with people, our role is to bring into realization, bring into awareness in their lives, mga kapatid, o brad, or sis, or ate, or kuya, tatay, hindi po coincidence yun. God has been moving in your life and He wants you to know Him. Looking back, ang daming pagkakataon sa buhay natin na miss natin. Akala natin nangyari lang. But God was there all along. God was there all along. The story ended this way. Jesus later on found him. I highlighted the word found because Jesus intentionally looked for him. Why? Because Jesus recognized him. He was there in the temple probably offering thank offering to God because of his healing. And Jesus approached him. Maybe he tapped him on his shoulder and said, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." Now, it's implied that this man was for a while well. Something because of his foolishness, something happened to him. I don't know, we are not told that he became paralyzed for 38 years. And then he is well again. Jesus is trying to say, now that you have received healing, even if you did not ask for it, be responsible or something worse will happen to you. Which means, I was asking, Lord, ano pa bang worse na pwedeng mangyari sa taong ito? 38 years. He could have died and go to hell. Because to receive miracle does not mean you go to heaven. It is when you put your trust in Jesus. Because faith is necessary to be saved. The gift of God is salvation. It is we are saved through faith by the grace of God. Stop sinning or something worse may happen. You know, there is a responsibility when we receive healing. How many times, di ba? It's true. How many times God healed us and after enjoying the healing, we abuse our body and our health. And then we come to the Lord again crying, Lord, forgive me. Mag-exercise na po ako. Tumaas uli cholesterol ko, Lord. How many times God performed miracles in our lives and after several months we ignore and try to abuse again our lives by working without resting? You see, when we are given responsibility, when given healing and freedom, it's not a joke, it's a responsibility. Now that you're well, what you do with it? Stop sinning, live for God, take care of yourself, be responsible. This miracle, the miracle that we are conversing about, displayed the power of God. You'll realize that miracles don't depend on our faith because God is free to work with or without our cooperation. But don't confuse miracles from salvation. In miracles, you don't need faith. God can intervene in our lives most of the time. But for salvation, for you to be saved, you need to believe. The man went away and told Jesus, or the Jews, tingnan niyo po, ito yung nakakainis eh. Who healed you? I don't know. And then when Jesus saw him in the temple, and he was face to face with Jesus, he never asked, "Who are you, Lord? I want to believe in you." The man did not even bother to ask. There was no faith expressed. Instead, ito pa yung reaction ng man. When he saw Jesus and said, "Stop sinning, or something worse is going to happen to you again." After that verse, the man went to the religious leaders and reported, "It was Jesus who healed me." Look at this man. How ungrateful. According to many scholars, they were criticizing this man for being ungrateful. You have been healed, and here you are going to the authorities, evading yourself from the responsibility, because if you violate Sabbath, you'll be excommunicated from the Judaism. He doesn't want to experience that excommunication, and he pointed to Jesus without the feeling of indebtedness. The man, sir, di ba, tinatanong niyo ako, sir, kung sino nagpagaling sa akin? The man who told me to pick up my mat, it's Jesus. He pointed to Jesus. There was no record that this man followed Jesus. It can happen to anyone if we don't know. But someday, I hope that the anonymous providence of God would lead us in the path that we come to the saving knowledge of Jesus and say, Lord, it was you all along. I'm very sorry. The miracle showed that God is willing to touch the lives of those who do not know Him. Because the God that we worship is not exclusive to us. He is the God of all people, whether those who believed on Him or not. That's why the Bible tells us someday when Jesus Christ will come again, read Philippians. Paul said, when He comes again, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that what? Jesus is Lord. Wow! Kumusta mga kapatid? How are you today? Well, in our conversation, probably God has been putting into your remembrance the instances in the past in your life. Maybe last week, maybe yesterday. Because God is never resting in doing miracles in our lives. He has been intervening in our lives in anonymous ways. Maybe for some of us, He's no longer anonymous because we know Him. We have placed our trust in Him. But try to look back many years ago. God's anonymous providence. When we had no idea who it was God. Now, our responsibility as followers and believers of Jesus is that when we cross paths with our friends, our colleagues, our office mates, our families and friends back home, when you attend a reunion, when people are thanking some or celebrating, let us bring into awareness to them. Let us bring God in the midst of our discussion. It is God who has been working in our families, in our life. When you're conversing with a friend, maybe your friend will share to you an experience, and you can say, oh, did you not see there? God was there in your life. God has been with you all along. How many times airplanes were saved from crashing that the passengers didn't even know who saved them? How many times our cars were delayed, detoured, because God is saving us for some accidents, and we were not aware of it? Anonymous providence. But the purpose of God is for us to bring to our friends and say, it was God. That's how we connect people to God. That's why we connect in this church. That's why we seek friendship, because we want to bring that awareness. We want to bring God in the lives of our friends, our family, that nothing happens here without Him knowing. Before we ascribe all these things to luck, suerte, people who are faithful to us or generous, but no. It was His anonymous providence. Now, what's your takeaway today? This is the big truth that I want you to bring home. Mga kapatid, when we leave this place and you look around and interact with people in your office, in your workplaces, remember, God is free in His sovereignty to show grace to every human being who neither knew Him nor believed in Him. We were once who are those who are not aware who He was. And yet we are recipients, beneficiary of His anonymous providence. For us who know, we no longer see Him as an anonymous provider. We start to see, that's why when He said to Nicodemus, unless you are born again from above, or you're born spiritually, you cannot see the kingdom of God. You're blinded to it. But when you receive Jesus in your heart, you start to see that no coincidences at all. God was there all the while.